I got no picture.
It's me.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. If we could please stand and recite the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all.
For those of you who. That's okay.
It happens when we want to.
For those of you who might be watching, and you only see two town council members up here. We have two that are going to be meeting us through the internet. One, Steve Cobb is in Florida, and Don Walsh is recovering from a knee surgery, so that's why you only see two people up front. I'm going to turn it over to the town manager to go through the budget for us.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're very happy to be here to start sharing the highlights of our proposed FY25 operating budget. The budget represents the sixth budget that Finance Director Dawn Parks and I, along with our departments and various councils, have worked on, with FY20 being the first. While that really is amazing to me because time flies, it also allowed for us to have a very good insight into where we've been, where we are right now, and where as a town we're heading in regards to the funding of all of our operations and services. Our story is kind of playing out as we have been suspecting and discussing over recent years. Ocean View is fiscally sound. It's safe, it's clean. We're working on complete community projects. We've been increasing our sense of community, and we're starting to see the constriction in our revenue streams. Thankfully, the wise decision was made some years ago to not rely on transfer tax revenue. This is key to the town's current stability. We don't need to wean ourselves off of it now. As it reduces. The FY25 budget that was presented, from my standpoint, represents doing what's right for our property owners, while also doing right by our dedicated employees, and continuing to stay competitive, maintain property values, which is key, and stay ahead on the maintenance of our infrastructure. All while we're operating in a professional, above board manner. And I love it. Okay. Okay, so as a point of note, Mayor and Council have had the full budget for 2 weeks for review. We have fielded some questions and shared all of our responses with all of you. Our budget has been also on the website for that same period of time. So this slide shows our key objectives and assumptions for the budget. The budget is currently proposed as balanced and includes an operating budget of $5,870,245 and a capital program of $1,995,595. We're recommending maintaining the existing tax base of 0.2378 per 100 assessed value for the third year in a row, but only by making some adjustments, which we'll mention in just a bit. We've included a cost of living increase of 3.9% for non-police department employees and across the board, 5,000 pay increase for sworn officers, which is aligned with the same increase to our starting salary for a new officer, now at 65,000. And lastly, a 0.401% cost of living increase for our contractual employees, Chief McLaughlin and myself. It should be noted, just for clarity, that the chief and I also received per contract a 3.5 increase. If you do the math on the COLA and that, the increase equals that of all the other employees, non-police employees. We also have included health insurance premium increases of 22.8%. I think that's unprecedented in my time frame of working in local government. And that's in association with communication received from the state of Delaware in December. And we've maintained a seasonal codes employee, summer weekend front desk support, and adjusted some fees. I was remiss on this slide, but it's highlighted in the budget message and documents. I've also included a full-time maintenance supervisor position that will lead our public works team and begin the process of taking over various duties from planning and zoning that are typically a function of a public works division for a city or a town. This next slide provides an overall summary of the proposed FY25 budget, including operating and capital projects, as well as our current forecast for our out years of FY26, 27, 28, and 29. In the yellow highlighted column, you can see we're forecasting revenue available for operations at $5,915,245 and expenses of 5.8 before the utilization of grant funds or funding from our trust funds. Also, for FY25, we're forecasting revenue in excess of operating expenses of $45,000, but this funding supports general fund obligations in our capital program, and I'll point this out in a future slide. You will note that even with a 1-cent tax rate increase that we've included for each out year of 26 through FY29, we're forecasting shortfalls for revenues less expenses. So this will need to be managed. You also note our revenue in excess of operating expenses falls short in the out years, meaning no fund availability from the general fund to support the capital program, and in turn, a reduction in unassigned fund balance. Keep in mind the unassigned fund balance is where it represents our minimum reserves for operations. And that amounts to $911,708 for FY25. But the good news is we should be able to meet our fund balance requirement in the years ahead. Again, this is our forecasting as of today for FY25 in the out years. But each budget year will be addressed separately at the time and with a more accurate forecasting and knowledge of the needs of the town, things on our horizons, and what we have control of or not. I wanted to also highlight some additional points from the prior slide in relationship to a year-over-year comparison. Looking at the public works operating expenses, they're reduced in FY25 as we have included less street and sidewalk rehab work. This is okay because we've been addressing this work heavily for several years. In relationship to grants, we budget for sure things such as funds we get annually from the state. But as you know, our departments are aggressively seeking grants from each year and have been very successful. Capital Reserve Trusts funds usage is increased in FY25 in association with our current utilization of this fund for non-OVPD equipment replacements. Street repair and replacement trust fund monies and capital improvement program expenditures are less in FY25 as a result of our determination that we are in a position to spread the work out over future years. We felt comfortable recommending this as a result of the level of work that has been completed. The next slide outlines the FY 25 to 29 capital program plan. It's a planning tool that helps us make decisions for the current year as well as the out years based on what we know right now, but also in considering the time necessary to oversee and inspect projects, usher them through the planning process, as well as manage the necessary funding. For more detail, this information for the totals is identified in pages 141 to 203. You also note that the 45,000 from the previous slide from the general fund that is supporting our capital program, which is for our planning division and covers things such as traffic analysis and other such support services. And lastly, our water system is still fairly young. We don't anticipate any water projects in FY 25. So, as you're aware from the initial discussions and from a review of the proposed budget documents, before we finalize the proposed budget and put it into your hands, there was a need to increase the tax rate by nearly 2 cents. I was hopeful that if we put our heads together, we might be in a position to trim some more so that we could maintain the existing tax rate for one more year. The items here on this slide, which amount to 230,000 of cuts and or revenue forecasting improvements. I highlight that the increased employee share for the healthcare of 11,000 was included, as well as an increase in general fund revenue with a boost from funds totaling 68,000 from our emergency reserve trust fund to assist in funding the town's share of our FY 25 anticipated increase to the cost to offer healthcare to our employees. There is also the addition, again, of 1 full-time public works superintendent position. This slide represents the FY 25 revenue projection in a pie chart, and it's also listed below. Property tax revenue remains our largest revenue stream, and we're going to discuss this even more in another slide. Councilman Cobb had asked for a breakdown yesterday of what makes up the miscellaneous revenue piece of the pie. It's basically revenues that don't fit into any of our other streams, mostly interest earned on investments, funds received from our cable franchise fees, and transfers from the water utility to cover staff time when working on issues related to the utility. In regard to the transfer tax revenue, our property values continue to be steady, and we continue to see higher numbers of existing home resales with a reduced number of new construction sales. For instance, our tracking of this data since May of 23 through January, our current fiscal year, our transfer tax revenue breakdown is 78.2% from existing home resales and 19.8% from new construction. You will recall that as we get closer to being built out, all of the quality of life and sense of community efforts, if you will, that you've been supporting and we've been working on as a town become even more important. So that given an opportunity to select Ocean View over another town in the area, those efforts may very well play a role in tipping the scale. Some of you have shared that you've heard such feedback. We put this slide together to drive home the point of where our tax rate is now and how we've attempted to levelize the tax rate while continuing to raise the much needed funds to operate and provide necessary services. As noted on an earlier slide, our tax revenue is our highest revenue producer. To that end, it's worth mentioning that not only have we recommended we maintain our existing tax rate for the third real year in a row, but getting to our existing tax rate included a 3-cent tax rate reduction 3 years ago. We're proud of that, given all that we've been able to accomplish, which you are well aware of and has been outlined in the budget message. Of course, our full town reassessment that hit the 22-23 tax year, and its increase to property values allowed for the rate reduction at the time. So while individual assessments may have increased as a result of the value of one's property, the improvements they made, etc., maintaining our property values benefits both the town and our property owners. The town annually to support operations and services, and the property owners annually through the quality of life and safety offerings, etc., and certainly at time of sale. Having the full reassessment as a code requirement every 5 years keeps us up to date and allows for fair and equitable taxing. But as noted earlier, we anticipate the need for some level of tax rate increases in the out years. With 1 cent plugged in for FY 22 through 29, it's not going to cut it. To be clear, absent new revenue cuts, etc., I don't foresee our ability to not increase the tax rate in FY 26. Another pie graph here showing our expenses. Public safety continues to be our largest expense and in turn represents our highest number of employees in one department. Ocean View has been reaping the benefit of our police department's efforts and operations, having a highly community policing and professional department that consistently results in Ocean View being ranked as one of the safest places to live in the state of Delaware. In relationship to expenses, our employees continue to be our largest and most important asset, like most businesses. Health insurance. The town of Ocean View, like many towns and cities in the state, participate in the state of Delaware health insurance plans. In December of last year, we were advised of a premium increase of 22.8%. We made contact with the state benefit office and confirmed that this level of increase was happening, and that is a quote. For that reason, and the timing of our receipt of the information, we included the 22.8% increase in our proposed budget. However, in February, we started to get word that the increase could be as much as 27%. We're hopeful that the increase will match the 22.8% originally reported or come in a bit lower. The vote, I'm sorry, that's okay. The vote will not happen until March, so we will have to keep you apprised of that information. Anyway, this proposed budget also includes the town employees paying the same employee share as that of the state employees in relationship to the plan they choose. There are 3 plans to select from with various categories for each, including employee only, employee spouse, employee child, or family. We utilized our employees FY24 plan selections as a guide to determine increased cost. So here's something new to Delaware and all of the towns and businesses in the state, the Delaware Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Plan. We provided some basic information here for you to get familiar with what it is. First of all, we are required to participate and we fall in the 25+ employee headcount, so all lines of coverage are also required. In January of 25, a little less than a year from now, we will have to begin paying into this fund at 0.8% of salaries. Claims can commence beginning January of 2026 after 1 year of collections. That means it impacts 4 months of our FY25 fiscal year. So we budgeted this new expense, which is estimated at $6,800 for the 4 months in our life and disability line items. In time for the FY26 budget, we will need to make some decisions, including if there will be an employee cost share, which is allowed up to 50% of the 0.8% of wages, and we will need to consider if we will continue to offer our short-term disability program. We're not prepared to make any recommendations at this time on that. There are limits, that of what we can do and what people can, put in claims for and what might be approved. And the maximum paid out is $900 a week regardless. I probably should have had this slide, a couple slides earlier, but we wanted to be sure to include the information we have been able to gather regarding other towns and what they're offering. There are also likely some other nuances that we didn't capture, such as do they offer all of the plans or do they limit some of the plans? From the responses that we've been getting, this is also a moving target. All of the towns represented are on the state health insurance plan. So they are all at various points of addressing the 22.8 increase. I can share that there is a lot of conversation with legislators and such in regard to this topic, and I have shared our concerns with our legislators. As you can see, there are different ways to approach this, and until this fiscal year, we were approaching it differently too. And in recent years, we've increased the cost share for our employees for their health care. In the end, utilization of the same percentage as that of the state was used as it's easier to explain and manage. You pick a plan and a category in the plan, and you pay 4, 5, or 13.25% of the premium that we have to pay the state. This is our a brief piece about the services at a glance. This document is updated annually. Of course, John West Park is our location for our community events. And we also have 2 community-minded beneficial tenants in our community center, South Coastal Village Volunteers and the University of Delaware Lifelong Learning. So just wanted to share some of our partners that we've had over the years and continue to have. And that will conclude anything formal. And then we're very open to answering any questions anybody will have. And Councilman Cobb as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think you and Dawn have done an outstanding job again this year in presenting the budget. I know it takes a lot of time and effort by a lot of people to put this together. And it is very understandable. And I like the fact that the budget is balanced. And I want to thank you for answering all the questions I had before, but I have 3 questions now.
Sure.
One question is Silver Woods and Shore Vista planning to put in cable and for MediaCom?
They don't typically put in the cable like I think is the experience at Bear Trap, where you have your own agreed contract, I believe, for time of response times. Typically, most of the developments, and we did have an outreach to Shore Vista for this question, but I haven't gotten the answer back
I have
yet.
the answer for you.
You do have it?
Yep, they're gonna use the provider that's available
Yeah.
along with an admin.
Yeah, we
So they're
knew
gonna lay the
that.
cable.
Pardon?
They will lay the cable?
Not the developer.
No.
Not the developer. Okay,
The service provider, in this case is MediaCom, will have a subcontractor come in and put their utility in.
on a
Then
case by
as
case
each-
basis.
As each house comes online, that subcontractor will come back and put the feed into the house.
And when they build the houses now, they're building them with the hookup anticipated because it's necessary. I mean, internally or on the outside of the house.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
but the Bear Trap experience is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that works pretty good. But each home is then committed, if you have more than one provider, is committed to one. And somehow that have to be corrected if that ever happens. Looking at slide 3, the 5-year outlook. And you were mentioning that if you go beyond 2025 in the out years, we're going to be in a deficit situation. That's assuming that we have a 1 cent increase.
We've only
year.
included 1 cent, but like I think I said in the budget message that, or maybe in the response to some of your questions, we're gonna have to address these things before.
Right, but I was wondering, if you were, this is just hypothetical. Let's say in 26, we decide that we want a 2 cent increase. And with a 1 cent increase, each year after that, would that 2 cent increase in 1 year have, a larger effect in reducing the deficit,
Yes. Yeah,
possibly where, 1 cent would be enough in the following year?
yeah, right now, 1 cent is 139,997. So. And that'll be different probably next year.
Mhm.
It depends on property values and things, but, I think the best way to say it is we don't want to not highlight this to you. We've been talking about it. It's been showing up. But with everything that we know and the percentages that we can plug in for the out years, we know we're going to have to address something, and it's going to be a time to do it. We've been very successful in being able to provide a leveling of the tax rate for the community and, but this, absent something I don't know of or to speak of right now, we'll have to do something and, could be 2 cents, it could be 1.5 cents, it could be 3 cents.
Well, I asked the question in order to allay fears that we would ever have another 50% tax increase.
I would never make such a recommendation.
Yeah. The last question I have is related to slide 6. Where you list the increase in the general fund revenue with transfer from the DRTF $68,140 in order to pay for the 20% increase in insurance. If the increase goes to 27%, would you be taking the money from that same fund in order to
We would recommend that sitting here today because we think this is an emergency.
mhm. And we have enough,
I've never seen such an increase.
and we have the money to do that,
We do.
okay,
The 68,140, every year when we calculate what needs to go into the emergency reserve trust, it's supposed to be 20% of your operating budget. So we calculate 28% of our proposed operating budget. And then check our account to see if we have the money in there. And whatever the difference is, that's what we put in. This year, we're not having to put anything in. We're actually over the amount by the 68,140. In years past, when we've been over, we've had not the need to use it. So it's just kind of sat there. This year, with the 22.8% increase in health insurance, we had the need to use that overage. So we're still making our requirement, what's required for the ERTF, the emergency reserve, with also taking and utilizing the 68,000.
great foresight on behalf of the town to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, any other questions? I'm sure Steve has questions.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, how are you?
Good.
Carol and Dawn, a couple questions. On the overtime hours, overtime to kick in was reduced from 2,280 hours to 2,080. In other words, a reduction of 200 hours per year. Is that correct?
To move into the 2080.
Yes, last year it was 2,280. This year it's 2,080. A reduction.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that by?
at the same salary. So the police department would work 80 hours, per pay versus 84, which is current.
Okay, I wasn't I was just talking about all departments.
Oh,
So has there been a reduction of regular hours worked through the course of the year of 200? And now those overtime hours would kick in at after quote 2080 as opposed to 2280 last year?
Okay, just one point of clarity, the rest of the employees were already on, were always on the
2080.
2080.
Mhm.
It's
2080.
just, yeah, that we were all, everybody else was already always on at 80, an 80-hour pay. And then the change with the police department, because the patrol officers actually work 48 hours.
Gotcha.
So there is a trend, this is something that's typical in policing to move towards this. That's what we have included. And then I'm not sure if I have your last question, if you could repeat it.
So now it's in line with the regular employees. It's 2080 for police and regular employees.
Yes,
Correct.
Very good. The Silverwoods and Bay Vista projects, the building permits, I think we talked about this briefly the other day. The building permits should start coming in a few, more than a few in 2025, but you foresee quite a few of them also in the years 2026 and then the out year of 2027.
yes.
Yes.
A 1% increase. Go ahead.
They're also plugged into those out years numbers.
They are. Okay.
What we forecasted is plugged in.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier that a 1% increase is approximately $140,000. And as the mayor brought up, 1 cent increase would cover the shortfall as in this budget outlook year. But that's assuming no other costs go up. So is it safe to say, 1 cent, 2 cent, or within a period of 3 years, it could be a staggered in 3 or 4 cents, meaning 1 cent a year, then 2 cents, then maybe 1 cent to cover some of these shortfalls?
For future years?
Yes.
Yes, it's, I would think that would be reasonable.
The
To
one thing,
assume,
yes, but the one thing, and I agree with you and the mayor 100%, by the way. But the one thing we do not know is the expense side of some of this. So on the out years, I mean, we're just preparing. And as the mayor said, we don't want to come up with 50 cents. But our best guess is 1 cent here, 1 cent the following year. But we still don't have the expenses because we don't know what they're going up. And that's hard to predict.
yeah, we did put some, some normal increase, in. We do know we also have another reassessment that'll come, that will be addressing and funding.
Yeah,
for
and that's
FY 27, build in FY 28.
yes, okay. And I think the mayor brought it up, and you had mentioned it also with the 68,000 coming over from the emergency trust funds. And for lack of a better term, I've said the last couple of years just in discussion, we're overfunding them. And one of the good benefits of overfunding them is just what we did this year. We were able to take some of that overfunding out and put it to good use to cover a shortfall. So great job. Budget's nice. A lot of hard work done on this, Carol and Dawn and Ken and Chief. Thank you so much. And my last statement is that the town of Ocean View is a great place to live. And it always starts with a combination of factors. But if it's not safe, it's like an elementary school. If there's not a safe environment, teachers and children can't learn or teach. And just like the town of Ocean View, it being safe allows for quality of life. It allows for people to enjoy our sense of town. And I just am so thankful for everyone that works for the town to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, any questions?
I don't, and I'd like to thank you all. So a lot of time went into this.
Appreciate it. Dawn does the lion's share of all the forecasting. Picks my brain about my thoughts about that type of thing. She's the one who handles all of the computer, programming to make sure all these sheets flow into each other. We were able to provide you with some of the questions, a new spreadsheet that we tried to put all the different questions that were being asked on one, especially related to health and cost of our employees. And have to really say to Joy to have somebody like Joy, to like Dawn to work with. And I think probably the other department heads would echo this, that, we're very fortunate because she can get the information very quickly for us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, kudos to Dawn, that's for sure. And one last thing, and the one person who guides all this and leads all this and takes the front of all this is the mayor. And Mayor, thank you for your leadership on this. You've always wanted to maintain the tax rate without reducing any quality of life or programs. And thank you for your leadership and guidance.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Russell, are there any people online? No? Well, if there are no further questions.
If I can just, with that said, I know we've had some communication from, Councilman, Walsh. And I'm familiar that, Councilman, Tyminski has had all the information available, and received the answers to the questions as well. I guess at this point in time, we would like to know if you think there's a need for a second workshop.
My feeling is, the answer is no. I think, you've answered all our questions, I think to our satisfaction. I would poll, Steve and Colleen as to whether you would believe it with that.
Well, this seems complete. So I don't think we need another workshop.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we do any more questions that we do come up as we go through this process. Obviously, we can call Dawn and any of the department heads or Carol. So at this time, unless something springs up, I don't see any need.
I think, we can answer that definitively after the town council meeting, in 2 weeks. If we have people that show up that have some concerns that we haven't addressed.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and keep in mind, before we get to the meeting where we introduce the budget ordinances, we can make, modifications to it, before that posting.
When is the next scheduled tentative workshop? It was in April, right? Or in March, I'm sorry.
The last Tuesday of March.
Yeah,
Last Tuesday of March, okay.
so it would be after the next meeting.
6, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for instance.
Okay, I would need a motion to adjourn if there's no further questions.
Mr. Mayor, motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All-
Aye.
All,
Aye.
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 Unanimous. We can leave.